Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Inclusive Teacher Co podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about why reading feels like rejection, and we're going to talk about supporting ADHD children without them tipping into shame. So, if reading at home or even homework at home turns into tears, anger, silliness, shutdown, meltdown, storming off, or that you make me feel stupid, or I hate you, I hate my life, then this episode is for you, because sometimes the problem isn't that the child can't read the words, it's that they feel emotionally unsafe. And I've alluded to this several times in many of my other podcasts, so please do go back and listen to my short episodes. Refusal is often protection, and that's what we know. So I'm Steph Beatty from Inclusive Teacher Co. I'm the founder of Inclusive Teacher Co. I'm a former English teacher. I'm a literacy specialist, a neurodiversity trainer. I also have ADHD. I support parents and I train educators in all matters of neurodiversity, but specifically ADHD. And I also talk about reading in ways that are practical, that are calm, and that are realistic in family life. So you are very welcome here. So today I want to talk about something that many parents are living through but don't always have the language for. That moment where you sit down to help and within minutes everything's gone sideways and you're thinking, I haven't even said anything wrong here. Maybe you've corrected one word whilst you've been reading along with them. Maybe you asked them a question or said, let's try this bit again. And then for some reason, they're furious, they're dysregulated, silly, shut down, devastated, all of those emotions that we think are completely out of proportion, but really they're neurological. And that reaction can feel so big that parents tell me that they're starting to second guess themselves. So was I too harsh? Did I say it wrong? Why does this happen every single time? So in this episode, I want to do three things. I want to first explain RSD, okay, what people usually mean when they talk about rejection sensitive dysphoria. And secondly, explain why reading is such a common trigger for some ADHD children. And thirdly, give you a practical way to support the reading without piling on that shame, without the pressure, and without the emotional overload. And we've got to think about you guys as well as parents, because you matter here too. So let's start with the term itself, RSD. RSD stands for rejection sensitive dysphoria, and it is a popular term used around and in among people who have ADHD, but it isn't actually a formal diagnosis as such. It's just commonly used to explain or describe intense emotional pain that's linked to perceived criticism, perceived being the operative word, failure or rejection, and it is often used to discuss emotions with regards to ADHD. And if we look at some citations, for example, we can look online at Cleveland Clinic. It describes it in that way, it also makes it clear that it's linked to emotional regulation challenges rather than standing alone as a separate diagnostic condition. And I think that distinction matters because I want this episode to be quite grounded and not vague. Now, I'm not saying that every child who cries over reading or homework has RSD, and I'm certainly not saying that there's one neat explanation for every meltdown. But what I am saying is that many people, especially many children, do experience significant emotional dysregulation if they have ADHD. They are highly sensitive to correction, perceived failure, social comparison. And when it comes to reading, it can press on all three at once. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, my child reacts like I've attacked them, well, I'm only trying to help, you're not imagining it. And again, that reaction might look out of proportion from your point of view, but inside that child's nervous system, it isn't small at all. So that is why I often say to parents that the child is not necessarily reacting to what you mean. They are reacting to what that moment felt like in their body, and that is the difference. They're not choosing drama, okay? You need to realize that the child's experiencing threat, shame, overwhelm. And when we know that, we can respond quite differently. Now, I want to talk about why reading is so often this flashpoint. Reading is very high risk for shame. It's not just a nice, quiet learning activity. For many kids, especially who have already had a bit of a wobble in school, reading is absolutely loaded. It involves being watched, corrected. It can expose gaps in their knowledge and their vocabulary and their fluency very quickly. And it can make a capable child suddenly feel very incapable. And if the comprehension is actually the weak point rather than the decoding, it's even hard for the adults to spot, because the child might sound as though they are reading perfectly well. They can read the words aloud. They appear fluent enough so everyone relaxes. But when we say things like, oh, what happened there? Or what did that character do? What do you think that word means in this sentence? Everything can sometimes seemingly fall apart. And there's a gap there. And that gap's absolutely crucial. Reading aloud isn't the same as understanding. And in ADHD, that gap can be especially significant because research shows ADHD is actually associated with challenges in areas that reading comprehension depends on. The sustained attention. Imagine getting a child to read about airplanes when all they want to read about is Justin Bieber, I don't know, for example. Okay, so it includes sustained attention, and if they're not interested in it, it's going to be even harder for them. It depends on working memory, it depends on self-monitoring, all part of our executive functioning skills that can be impaired if you are neurodivergent. So children with ADHD might decode the text. Okay, they might be able to read the word and read the sentence fluently, but they might struggle to hold on to that meaning. They might struggle to connect ideas across sentences and build a very coherent understanding of what they have read. So when a parent says, but they can read, I always want to gently say, well, yeah, maybe they can read the words, but that isn't the whole job. Okay, so reading for school success isn't just about sounding out the print. It's about understanding, connecting, remembering, inferring, and staying with the text long enough to build for meaning. And that is a huge task, and it becomes even more huge or bigger as children move from primary into secondary school. The text can become denser, more abstract, more vocab heavy, and less supported. And this is important as well, especially if you're a subject teacher at secondary level listening to this. Take it from me. We've all got responsibility. It doesn't matter what subject we teach, for teaching literacy. It's not a bolt on. It is embedded. It is just good teaching and learning. And I've said that since I became head of literacy in my last school. I've said from day dot, I've said it's good teaching and learning. It's just good pedagogy. It is not a bolt on to the lesson, like we've got to do literacy or tick that literacy box. All right. So when subject teachers are teaching these children at secondary level, we've got to also think about the position that they're in as well, because these teachers at secondary level, yes, they might have an understanding of, okay, this child is 15 with a reading age of 12. Okay, because they teach 12-year-olds as well as 15-year-olds. But if you have a 12-year-old with a reading age of 8, a secondary level teacher might not necessarily know what that looks like, what that presents like, or how to even present academic material or written material to that child, or what text or what format or what level of text they should present to that child, because they don't know what age 8 reading age looks like. Okay, but this is exactly the problem that my ADHD reading at home program is designed around. It's not just a home reading task. It focuses on all of these things and builds those skills like comprehension, inference, vocab, emotional regulation, of course, as well, and sustainable support for learners with ADHD aged 8 to 14. The National Literacy Trust, I do read a lot of the research on the National Literacy Trust. So the data from 2025 shows that only 32.7% of kids, of children and young people aged 8 to 18 said they enjoyed reading in their free time. Okay, so about a third. And only 18.7% said they read daily, so it's less than a fifth. Okay, they are the lowest levels recorded since we started tracking. Reading practice and reading confidence feed directly into each other. If they feel confident, they are more likely to read. If they read, they're more likely to build fluency, vocabulary, and understanding. And children who find that difficult will avoid it, which means they get less of the very practice that will close that damn gap. All right. This pattern's actually backed up. There's some longitudinal research that's been done as well. It was more than 11,000 children. They found that evidence that of reading ability and how it influences how much children choose to read. So in other words, children don't simply read more and therefore get better. They often get better enough to want to read more. And this is why I want parents and I want teachers to stop seeing this reading avoidance as laziness, because as I said earlier, it's protective. And the child has learned that reading makes them feel exposed, behind, stupid, so they avoid it, not because not because they don't care, but because it hurts them, and they start expecting that shame. So any small prompt can feel enormous to them. So you'll get those moments where an ordinary reading session will turn into, you make me feel stupid, I hate reading, I hate my life, I'm not doing this, leave me alone, yada, yada, yada. And at that point, most parents, understandably, try to push harder because they don't want them to give up, or they back away completely because the whole thing feels explosive. And neither response is coming from a bad place, but neither really solves a problem. Pushing harder confirms the child's sense that reading is the place where they fail under pressure. Backing away completely can protect the relationship in the short term, but it can also leave the underlying difficulty, the reading difficulty, untouched. Okay, so the goal isn't pressure or avoidance, it's just safer support. So it's not how do I make my child just get on with it, but it's more of a question of how do I make reading feel safe enough for learning to happen. And it's a completely different question, but I want to give you a couple of ways to do this. So first of all, we don't need to turn reading into a live test. Okay, if your child is sensitive to correction, don't make every reading a performance. We don't spring it on them. We don't open with questions that sound like a quiz. We don't sit waiting for mistakes. Okay, it's meant to be enjoyed. We should be reading for pleasure and getting lost in books and texts that absolutely cater to our interests. So we lower the social threat. And again, ADHD Reading at Home program, it's only 97 quid. You'll get lifetime access for it. We talk about this and more. You'll get resources and strategies, but we talk about reading together, sharing that load, maybe using an audio, maybe you reading aloud, taking turns, letting them track while you read, give them some autonomy, give them some choice as well. And choice for an ADHD is very, very important, to give them some choice. There was a 2025 National Literacy Trust report, and it found that among children with low reading enjoyment, motivators included reading linked to films or TV that they already liked, texts to match their interests or hobbies, and being free to choose what they wanted to read. And I think that fits beautifully with ADHD support, because that interest steers their attention, that choice element lowers resistance, and the familiarity lowers threat as well. So again, when the parents say, oh, they only want to read football blogs or magazines, or they only want to read Minecraft guides, or they'll only read something linked to a show they watch, my response is brilliant. That's excellent data. Start there. Okay, the point isn't to win the battle over what counts as respectable reader and turn him into a bookworm. The point is to get the child back into contact with a successful reading experience. So that's the first thing I would do. Second is to reduce that live correction. So if every line starts to become feedback, well, first of all, they're not going to actually realize what the point of the sentence is if you start giving them feedback on every line. Okay, the child will stop experiencing reading as reading, and it'll start to turn into failure with an audience. And it doesn't mean that you don't help. It just means that you become more strategic when you are reading with them. So you don't correct everything. You just choose the goal. It's like when I was marking reading comprehension, for example. I'm marking for reading comprehension. I'm not correcting spellings. Why would I do that? It's absolutely irrelevant. So you choose the goal. So sometimes it's comprehension, sometimes it's confidence, sometimes it's simply staying regulated enough to sit and read for 5 minutes straight. It's useful and it counts. Okay, so the second thing is to basically reduce that live correction and choose your goal. Thirdly is the language that you use as well. A child who is already feeling shame, they don't need more emphasis on what's wrong. So if you say things like, oh, you know this, come on. And they're like, well, I don't, or come on, try harder, or just concentrate, or no, that's not quite right. That language is quite threatening, right? But when the threat goes down, access goes up. So saying things like, I'll take this sentence, or you're safe, we're not in a rush, let's do this together. That was a bit tricky. You're lowering the sense of threat. Again, threat goes down, access goes up. And fourth, regulate as well before you teach. So if a child's already dysregulated, that reading support isn't going to land. The thinking brain isn't fully available in that state. Okay, you can't operate from a state of logic if you are not in that state already. So before you try to teach, think about stabilizing. So pause, slow your voice, reduce the demand? Can you give them movement, a short reset, offer water, and then return in a smaller way? Okay. And this is one of the reasons my program's really strong, because it doesn't frame reading support as simply getting them to do more. I explicitly include emotional regulation, low pressure questioning. I even give a list of questions, moving up reading skills. It includes movement, sustainable routines for helping on overwhelmed days as well. And again, a lot of families are missing this, which is why I've priced it affordably. Now, I want to say something really important. This isn't about making everything easy forever or wrapping this kid in cotton wool. It's about understanding that shame is a massive blocker for learning. And if they're repeatedly being tipped into shame, then definitely not going to be in a good state for skill building. All right, it's just common sense. So we reduce that shame to make reading practice possible again. And that matters. All right, and intervention does help. There was a 2022 meta-analysis which found that any reading interventions were effective for these at-risk readers or readers with ADHD. Okay, so this is absolutely not hopeless. It's not fixed. It's not just how they are. The right support can improve outcomes. Again, that's why I've built the program ADHD Reading at Home, and you don't have to be a teacher to be able to deliver it. It's lifetime access, so you can dip in and out, but it's very, very structured, because many parents are stuck in this place where their child can read aloud, but they miss key information. They avoid reading because they feel rejected. They struggle to explain what they've read, and they're overwhelmed. They melt down and shut down. And the parents are thinking like, well, how do I do this? How do I support them without turning into a teacher every night? Why is it so hard when they can already read the words? What do I need to do to protect the relationship and not nag them? So my program is built to answer those questions. And as I said, it's practical. It's a very parent-led program as well for supporting reading comprehension, confidence and engagement in ADHD learners. And it's appropriate for around ages 7 to 8 to about 13 to 14. Okay, it's got step-by-step modules, lessons, they build on one another, lots of resources that you can print and reuse, you can make your own, comprehension, inference, vocab, regulation and calm, sustainable reading routines. And if you actually go onto some of my social media on Instagram or Facebook, you will see a couple of posts there where you can comment the word or DM the word routines, and you can actually get some free downloads as well. But again, the program is designed to work with ADHD brains rather than against it. So if this episode feels painfully familiar, then that is the next step I would point you to. I don't want to put more pressure onto you as a parent, quite the opposite. I don't want you to panic either. I think most parents don't need more information telling them that reading matters. They just need a clear, doable way to help at home without every session ending in conflict. So that's what ADHD Reading at Home is there to do. I just want to say absolutely thank you for giving me your time. It's much, much appreciated. And if this episode helps, make sure you subscribe so the next one can land in your inbox automatically. Thank you, guys.